Okay, so I will talk about auto backup and more specifically about how auto backup can break your application. Because basically you can read about auto backup inside of the documentation, and it's really simple mechanism. So there is no way in making a presentation about the regular use of auto backup that's 4 minutes long. So instead, I will tell you about our experiences at Base, my company, with other backupping tools. So I'm Mateusz. I co-organize events for GDG Krakow. I'm also the Google Developer Expert for Android, and I work, obviously, as Android engineer. So first, let's introduce some basic facts about the Android backup. So Android backup is like one of the most crucial features that were introduced together with the Android 6.0 Marshmallow, and they're enabled for every single application by default. No additional app code is required to make it work. So you just update to Marshmallow and your applications start to back up. In theory, it's that simple. So what does it mean that they are enabled by default? It means that Android, starting from the 6.0, will automatically back up your databases, shared preferences, which are also represented by the files inside of the application directory, and basically everything inside of your application directory, data, your package name, except for two methods. Except for two directories that are that you can learn about using those methods. So you should never use hard-coded paths inside of your app, for example, to reference the no backup files there, because they may change over the future Android releases, and this might break your application behavior. You should always use those directories in order. You want, for example, to push some thumbnails cache for your application that will not be backed up using the Android backup. So how does it work is basically once in 24 hours, if you are connected to the Wi-Fi, fortunately, and if it's overnight, because Android already knows that you are sleeping, and your device is idle, so you are not moving it and not doing basically anything with it, and charging. Then backup of your application, and any other application on your phone will be sent to the Google servers. So in case something wrong happens to your device, you can fortunately, hopefully restore that data. Backup is stored during the installation. So basically, if you are installing the application on your second phone or on the same phone after, for example, some unfortunate Android upgrade, then after you install the application, the post-installation step will be to hit the Google servers and restore your application data from the backup. A very important thing is that to make it work, your application needs to target the SDK 23. In case your target SDK, for example, still points lollipop, the auto backup behavior will be disabled for your app. So I lied a little telling you that it works for every single app. So once you are conscious about the newest version of Android to bump your target SDK, then you should check whether the auto backup works fine for you. Easy, right? So yeah, that's all about Android auto backup. You can basically do. So yeah, questions? No, just kidding. You know that icon? Who has an idea? Titanium backup, exactly. The so-called worst-case scenario for Android developers if something goes wrong, then it's probably Titanium backup to back up your application. So Backup is not a new concept on Android. There were some attempts, both from Google and from third-party companies, that were trying to standardize the backup mechanism for years. Fortunately, we now got a standard that seems to be established, but it's not a new concept, right? And although auto backup that was introduced in 6.0 is a standard now and works well, you can still face the very same problems you were facing with the Titanium backup or previous Google-based solution. So we use HipChat for our internal communication at the company, and one of our channels, think of it like the IRC channel, is responsible for just displaying the errors and the exceptions that are happening to our customers on production. So once I came to the office in the morning at 1 p.m., and then I saw this. And the message is can't downgrade database from version 814 to 810. This slide is cut, but basically, if you are familiar with the SQLite Open Helper class, you know that it shouldn't be possible that for some reason application receives the newer version of a schema of the database that is actually supported by the application. Because, for example, if you want to install the older version of the application over the newest version of the application using the ADB install, for example, you'll receive an error telling you that you cannot downgrade, right? So this situation was super uncommon, and we didn't really know at the beginning what really happened and why this executed. That was the only customer that faced that problem. So what happened? Basically, someone got the Titanium backup on his or her phone, had the newer version of the application, that backed up all the files that were sitting inside of the application directory, and then the same person installed the application on some older device that wasn't supporting the newest version of our app, so the database schema was just downgraded, right? So it happened just because of the backupping tools. And the same problem can happen in the auto backup. So how to defend? The very first thing that might come to your mind after looking at this terrible stack trace is just to disable backup, right? In order to disable backup, you can just put the Android allow backup parameter and set it to false inside of your application manifest, and suddenly application will be not backing up. Or just follow good practices instead of disabling the mechanism that can be really helpful and really like lifesaver for your users. So I prepared a couple of practices that I made up myself about handling tools that are backupping your application. And the practice number one is that do not backup data that's synchronized with your server anyway. So let's say that we got a table representing contacts inside of our app, inside of our database, and the contacts like regular contacts or the first name, the last name. And there is also the interesting flag called modified. So whenever you are changing something on your phone, you need to set that modified flag to 1 in order to let your synchronization process know that this data is modified and needs to be sent in the next synchronization cycle, okay? So let's say that we are inserting a new contact and we are setting that flag to 1 just to make sure that this contact will get eventually synchronized with the server in the nearest future. And then Android backups your data at this very moment before the synchronization starts. So what happens? What do you think? Now, let's say that you got 5 different Android devices. and you populate those changes on every single device. So what happened? What happens? Every device that will receive the backup will post that update to the server, right? So once the database that was in that state lands on the secondary device, the same application with the same synchronization process algorithm will just post the Jan Kowalski to the server again, which means it results in duplicates, right? So in case your application is synchronizing data to the server, it's already kind of the backup, right? There is no point in duplicating this mechanism using the auto backup. So if your database is syncable database, consider removing it from the backup list. And how to do that? Again, inside of your application manifest, you are just adding the Android full backup content parameter attribute that links to the XML file that is a descriptor on how your Android backup, auto backup strategy should work like. So the file is really simple. The schema is really simple. You just exclude the my database file from the backup list. The important thing is that instead of just putting the hard-coded database directory, so without this domain, we would just have the path databases/mydb. We use the domain. And again, it's a convention that didn't really change from the API level 1, as far as I remember, but still, it's only a convention that the databases on Android for the Android application sit inside of the databases directory. If it will change in Android 7.0, then you are simply screwed, right? So using this domain database is very important. Instead of excluding, you can also include, and then the auto backup, which is parsing your XML configuration, will just change the mode from the exclusion to the inclusion. So in case our settings file looks like this, no files except for the database will be backed up. And there is no way to combine the include and exclude tags inside of your backup scheme. The domain can accept the variety of types. So apart from database, we got also the shared preferences. We got the files, external, and root, which you can use instead of hard coding the file URIs inside of your configuration. Don't hard code absolute paths. Again, it's very important. So practice number 2: take care of data migrations. What does data migration mean? Obviously, it means the database schema changes, right? So if your application got the contacts table that represent the first name and the last name, and then you want to add the additional column which will represent the phone number, then you need to handle this migration in order to not make your application lose data, not make your users lose data, right? You need to handle this schema migrations. And the same mechanism will happen for the auto backup, right? It may happen that you receive older data from the older version of the app in the newer version of the app. Also can happen to the shared preferences and any serialized data. For example, if you serialize some settings POJO to JSON and then store it inside of the shared preferences or just a plain file in your file system, you need to take care of the migrations because it's not said that the data you'll receive from the auto backup will match the exact version of the application that is actually installed on the device. Yeah. Practice number 3. Use Provide GCM, right? Now Google forced us all to use the GCM with dose mode and app standby. If you are not using the GCM, your application will simply not receive notifications. So raise your hand if you are using GCM. I cannot see anything anything because of those lights. So yeah, that wasn't the very good idea. But thanks for raising your hands. Anyway, GCM offers you something called the registration ID, which is a kind of a token that identifies your device, the user's device on the Google servers, on the GCM servers, right? So each device got its own unique registration ID that can be used for pushes. You need to remove it from backup, right? Because it might and probably will break the GCM behavior on that device and the another device that will receive the backup with your registration ID and this registration ID will be indeed associated to the another device, then GCM will simply stop working on the both of these devices, right? So it's very important to keep your registration ID outside of your backup scheme. Same for any other device unique tokens, keys. I know that often, for example, you are requesting to the GCM servers for the registration ID, only in case you don't have it already, right? There is no point in requesting it every single time. You just cache it in the database, shared preferences, like file and storage, anywhere, and you do not request it again. So in case this kind of a property would be backed up and then restored on the another device, this application would not request it again, would break the behavior. You can also check if the instance ID fits your needs here. Basically, you can use it also for the GCM messaging, and all the caching will be done by the Google Play services library, so you do not have to worry about it anymore. How to do such things like removing the registration ID, like a simple property out of your backup? For example, you can have the separate shared preferences file, like a non-default shared preferences file that stores such properties on the user's device, and then is excluded in your backup scheme. The separate database, for example, you can do it. Just another implementation of the SQLite Open Helper that will use the file name. Okay, practice number 4. So I told you about how Android backup auto backup can break your app, and now I tell you how it can put you in jail. This is a bit more dramatic than it should be, I know, but I wanted you to keep you awake. So technically speaking, auto backup sends your user's data to Google, which means auto backup sends your user's data to a different third-party company, right? You need to ask yourself if your application is keeping some kind of the confidential data that, for example, is part of a contract that you have with your customers. Like, let's say you are selling a product and you are signing a contract with each customer that you will not disclose the data with any third-party entities. And then auto backup sends like the list of private messages to the third-party company. I'm not saying Google is doing anything with that. They are not doing anything wrong. They are not doing any harm. But this can be a legal issue you need to consider. And if you really think, but only if you really think that this data is needed to be backed up, because, for example, it takes much time to rebuild it from scratch, encrypt it. You can use the encryption, encrypt data, encrypt, for example, the database file and send the encrypted data to the server, to the Google server. And this will work and will be completely legal, probably. Probably in many countries. Okay, so backup is cool, recovery is cool, use it wisely. And leaving default settings and ignoring the fact of existence of auto backup isn't always wise. For most of the app, it's not. So, one more thing. Oh, totally, I totally forgot about those slides. They are also surprising me, this 25 megabytes thing. Anyways, if your backup size exceeds the 25 megabytes limit, auto backup is disabled for your app. And it will not work, simply. It will be disabled. So you need to decide what's your strategy. For example, there is probably no point in synchronizing some huge files you can download from the internet anywhere, because this will disable your backup mechanism for forever, right? So no strategy is opting out, basically. So if you don't have a strategy for your auto backup, it's, in most of the cases, it means the same as going to the application manifest and disable the backup mechanism at all. In case your data directory is bigger than a few megabytes, it will eventually disable the auto backup mechanism for that app. And it's even worse because people who are using your app, your users, will think that actually there is some backup, so they can rely on it, but suddenly there is not, because it's lost, because you exceeded the limit. So make sure your backup is not exceeding the 25 megabytes limit, and thanks. Questions?
Questions? Okay. So what about questions? Yeah, okay.
I also accept questions regarding those photos at the beginning. Like, yeah.
Okay. My question is about clearing data manually. When user goes to application settings and clear cache in data, will the data from cloud removed?
So the question is, if we go to the application settings and press the clear data, what will happen? What will happen to the backup?
Yes.
So the backup will get lost after it's scheduled. So if you get into this one moment in a 24 hours, then what Android does is sending your data, my fine company, my cool application directory. It packs it, zips it, and pushes it to the server. So in case you clear the data, you will simply lose the backup. But it's user's choice, right? It's the same case as they would go to the contact list, for example, and delete some particular items. This still should be reflected in the backup. So it's not a bad behavior. Any other questions?
Okay, I have a question. How much is secure to store the backup data at Google services? I mean, we can imitate Google server and to receive or send some data there.
Well, as far I know, for the vanilla Android and the Google distributed Android, there is no way in overriding this behavior, getting the Android backup mechanism and plugging it to the different servers. Probably it may happen for some manufacturers, like probably Samsung will not, maybe they will go for their own backup mechanism, I'm not sure. It's definitely safe, the same as your other data you have in Google. But you need to consider the legal issues. But even if it's safe, if you are sending the confidential data over the wire to the third-party company, if, for example, one of your customers is the IT geek and pays you a lot of money and then sniffs the connection that you are sending the data to Google, then they may sue you, for example, for that. So you need to consider the legal issue, but I'm pretty sure the data is safe.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for your presentation. I have a question. Can we force the backup thing, like in order to test it or check how we handle this? you said that it is performed once in 24 hours. Can we force this process?
Is somewhere in the documentation. I will answer this question after, okay? Because I don't remember if that was possible to do using some ADB commands. It's definitely possible for some other Marshmallow features like those or permissions. Probably not for backup, but I will check that and we'll let you know. But there is probably no some ADB command that you can force the backup. I'm afraid of.
Hi.
Hi.
Maybe I skip something, but how can I clear the backup on the Google server? Because there's so short backup size, 25 megabytes. If I want to clear my backup on the Google, how can I do it?
Google offers you to, generally speaking, clear all the data about you that they keep. So for example, your history of your searches, history of your OK Google calls and stuff like that. If you go to this history.google.com website, then you can simply check what kind of the data is associated with your account and you can clear it. Does this answer your question? You are thinking about like removing your backup from the Google servers, right? Or
Can I program it manually, clear users' backup if I reach this limit, 25 megabytes?
okay,
I want to clear the user's backup and.
I understand. So the question is, if it happens to us that we exceed the limit of 25 megabytes, how to revert that disaster? So the answer is that auto backup disables the backup for your application. So it's not sending it after you exceed the limit, but periodically it's checking whether you are still over the limit or not. So basically, if you change the settings of your backup inside of your XML file, push the update to the Google Play, user install it, then the Android will reflect those changes, check if it's still over the 25 megabytes or not, and if it's okay, then it will back up your data and overwrite everything you already had associated with that.
Hi. About those 25 megabytes, is it counts in zip or unzipped data?
Very important question. I'm not sure. I need to check it and we'll let you know. Come to me after the presentation. We can check it together.
Okay, and second question about Titanium backup. It does use the root access. So I think it doesn't consider the manifest. So whatever you say, allow backup or not, it will back up all the data. I just guess so.
It won't back up. If you decide to put that attribute inside of your application manifest, then Android backup will run somewhere on the system level and will back up eventually for the other apps, but they will skip your application. It will skip your application and your application will be not backed up. It's just standard. It's the part also of the documentation that if you put this attribute, then simply auto backup ignores your application.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I see.
Hello.
Hi.
The people started to discuss the 25 megabytes, and the question is, so if in one batch, so when you're posting a backup, it is exactly, for example, 25 megabytes, and if the new backup, which is, about to be sent to Google, is the same amount, would it, just override the old backup?
No.
Would not be logical?
No, it will not override it.
Oh, okay.
I received that question on some GDG meetup, and I didn't know the answer. I checked it, and yep, it doesn't override currently.
Okay, I have. Okay, I see.
Hi. So if Google already done full backup and I added to manifest some exclude option, so how to clear previous old backup and create new?
Just as I said before, this question already happened probably. If your application offers a new strategy for backupping, then once it fits in this 25 megabytes limit, then the changes will be reflected and your previous backup will be cleared, and the new backup that reflects the new schema will get into our account. So.
Okay. Any other? Okay.
So many questions today. I like it.
Hi. Does we have any handlers for encryption, decryption, stream of backup data?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Does we have any Android API for encryption and decryption data stream that will back up on the Google servers?
Yeah, for example, in case of the SQLite databases, there are APIs that allows you to encrypt it, but you need to encrypt it before Android Backup asks for it. It's not like Android Backup gives you a callback and then you can override some input stream that is being sent to the server. If you want your data to be encrypted, for example, your database to be encrypted, then you need to encrypt it at the beginning, and then Android Backup will just send the file over the wire.
Okay. Okay, I have.
Hi. Simple question. Could you describe most popular case when a user really need backup?
Okay. User loses the data. No, to be honest. It happened to me, for example, that I lost my phone. Like I destroyed it. I had so I bought another phone, and once you install you configure your Gmail account on it, your Google account, your applications got reinstalled from the Google Play, but without the data. That was the previous behavior. And now Android will just restore your application state and together with the data. So that's one case. And it happened to me. There was no backup at that time, so I lost a lot of data, like notes that weren't synced anywhere. Does it answer your question?
Okay. We're generating new and new questions.
Cool.
Yeah, hello. Why did they choose 25 megabytes?
I like that question. It actually makes much sense. I don't know. They probably know, and they are optimizing for like a total size of this data consisted from all gathered from all the users. But this question reminds me some like a constant field in the code that, for example, like a cache size equals 5, and then one person, for example, approached me, why there is 5, and the reason was because. So I'm not really sure. There is no answer for that in the documentation.
Hello.
Hi.
You told us a lot of examples of data which should not be backed up. But what are the examples of data that should be backed up? Because, for example, like unique device tokens should not be backed up. Server data, which is like fast, quickly changed, should not be backup, and it's like 75% of data in usual applications is already in these categories. So what kind of data should be backup?
That's right. Excluding the syncable database, tokens, and stuff is like the 75% of data, and that's the reason why the 25 megabyte limit is still sufficient. It doesn't need to be like much greater. What kind of data do we need to backup? Think of, for example, the database that is not being sent to the server. So you got, for example, the application, like a to-do list application, and data that you are inputting, like you putting inside of this app, is not synced anywhere, right? So in case your user will lose the device, there is no way to restore that data. So that's a pretty good candidate for a backupping. So basically the strategy should be like common sense, and you need to answer, so is there any other way how the user can restore that data? If there is not, and if that data is crucial, so for example, this is the user input, not application generate stuff, then it probably should be included in the backup scheme. Like, if you are writing a game, for example, and you got some save states, right, that are not synced, it's also probably a good candidate for backupping. So people don't have to go through the game from the beginning again. It would be really annoying.
And the last question, if we store some user data, still database, for example, that's stored only locally, and then we could still achieve the situation with those downgrade exceptions. So probably should we, in that case, handle this exception anytime, and if it occurs, like notify user to update the application? Probably, no?
So correct me if I'm wrong. So the question is, what should be our strategy?
Just should we always check whether this exception could be generated by Android system, like when user just install old version of the app on a new device, and your database just restored from backup.
Okay, so I don't know if that's still the case for the auto backup. It didn't happen to us and any of our users that auto backup specifically backupped the newer version of the app and then migrated it to the older version of the app on some other device. I'm not even sure if there is no check, for example, for that in the auto backup. I would suppose there is, like there is no way to send the newer version to the older version of the app. It didn't happen to us. As far as I know, this situation is not described in the documentation as well. We might try it somehow manually.
Okay. My question is not more the question, it's more than maybe answer or hypothesis. That's why many people ask why 25 megabytes. Maybe they should or try to exclude games out of applications, not to back up games because most likely are big and not prepared for backupping. So just a hypothesis.
Yeah, it's also the case for the regular apps that you can exceed the limit. For example, if you are using the SQLite database and you keep a lot of data in offline, and for example, you offer a search based on the full text search mechanism in the SQLite, it simply doubles your database size to store all the tokens. So, for example, for our app, for our biggest customers, the database is like 100 megabytes or so. So if we would decide to sync it with the auto backup, we would simply disable the auto backup for our app. But yeah, the games are probably the major type of the app that can exceed the limit.
Hello. So your title of the presentation was Auto Mobile Backup, and I, I so why there were no cars in the presentation? Like, I was here. I thought there would be cars, and that's why I'm here. And another question, actually, when you're using one device and it's backing up the data, yes, then you buy another device, so it synchronizes with that device, and then you change the data on both devices, so they will overwrite each other like every day or in the backup.
They will.
They will. So
The last one wins. This was also some kind of the misunderstanding at the beginning of the auto backup concept in the M developer preview. Yeah, they're overriding themselves because you cannot simply solve that problem in a better way,
it's not
right?
syncing, it's just backing up.
Yeah, backing up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we need to say thanks to Mateusz for whole answers and for presentations and release scheme. At last release scheme. Okay, thank you.